Hello and welcome to Guy Shrink. I'm Bill Roman, host here, and I'm with my good friend, compatriot, and producer of this, Jordan Valdiviez, and our co-producer,
the Keegan
Burner, who's manning the cameras.
The famous Keegan Burner.
Yes, he is famous.
He's famous.
It's going to be, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
We'll be talking.
Yeah, we are talking. And so this is our first, this is our launch podcast, I think.
Oh.
I'd call this our launch.
This is the launch.
Yes.
Launching out. Where are we launching to?
So, well, we're going to be a voice of sanity in the proliferating world and industry of guy myths, man myths, and over-the-top advice and direction on how to be a guy.
Okay.
And we want to be a voice of sanity that has a different way of looking at these kinds of things. So that's what we're going to discuss.
Yeah, a lot of things come
podcast.
to mind when this topic of guy myths. What comes to your mind immediately when someone says guy myths?
Well, I've got to make a career out of going to the gym 5 hours a day.
Okay.
And, be the Incredible Hulk and be impervious to pain.
I only eat protein.
I only eat protein, right? All these kinds of things. So there are so many websites now and podcasts on how to be a guy, how to be a man, real man, whatever. And I think it's so TMI. It's so much information to try to figure all this stuff out. And you can make a full-time career out of following all the advice that's out there.
Oh, man.
And I'd like for us here at Guy Shrink to be a voice of sanity in that large, exploding world of male myths and all kinds of opinions about what it means to be a real guy. So we're going to talk about stuff that I think rolls around in a guy's head at night, keeps him awake, have heartburn, and would never in a million years seek out a therapist, but might talk to a buddy about. And so that's what we're going to do here at Guy Shrink. We're just going to talk with some friends and some new friends and some experts and maybe just other regular people who are just trying to lead the way. And that's what we plan to do here.
I love it, man. Guy Shrink. Guy Shrink. You know, it's a word that's kind of like migrated out of the vernacular, but it has I like how you're spinning on it.
Well, thanks. The whole notion of shrink years ago, to a generation ago, it was
right.
I need to see my psychiatrist, and
Yeah.
everybody called him shrink.
Where did that come from?
I think you're washing your brain until it shrinks, kind of like. I've got a wool sweater here, and I washed it in hot water, and now it's a petite sweater. It used to be extra large.
The brain just getting too full of
too
things.
much stuff. Yes, got to wash it.
Yeah, I mean, like brainwashing is generally a negative term, but if you look at it from first principles, I think you know what, you probably need to wash it every once in a while, right?
Absolutely. It's clogged with lots of things. Again, too much information, TMI.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do here on Guy Shrink is to get a few things, some voices of sanity out there. Like we want to talk about relationships, men in relationships.
Right.
I've got a planned podcast on how to fire a friend. Having friends as a guy is important.
Yes.
But what happens when that goes awry? What do you do with that? We want to talk about midlife crises.
Like, how can it not go awry, right?
Well,
like that one in particular.
Yes.
It's like that's one of the most tough things anybody probably has to do. It's like a breakup. Right?
Yes. And so managing that in a healthy way is an important thing to do. We're going to talk about guys and families, whether we like it or not. We all got one. And how do you manage that?
Tough dynamic.
Exactly. Somebody said that anybody that comes out of a family of more than one person comes from a dysfunctional family. And so how do you manage whatever you want to call dysfunction? How do you manage that as a guy in your family of origin as well as your nuclear family, if you have one, or relational family? So we're going to talk about a number of things on our show. And this is our kickoff podcast where you and I get a chance to just talk to each other about friendship, for number one, and what kind of stuff rolls around in our head. So,
man, that's dangerous territory.
Dangerous territory. Okay,
going into the brain space, the rolling around, the tumbleweeds.
I was thinking about maybe one of the ways we could kind of kick this off is, what are some of the influences you've had in your life as a young man, and where's that taken you?
Well, I'll answer that if you tell me yours as well. That sounds like a good.
Oh, we could do that.
Yeah. Okay. So, man, I'm not so good off my hip, so I like to take notes.
Okay.
So I got some notes. You said what was the question?
I'm going to call it defining moments. What might be some defining moments in your life, and we'll talk about some for me.
Several. I'll go into one. But when I was a kid, I was born in California, and we moved from LA area to Toledo. So that definitely
culture shock.
Yeah, culture shock. Yeah, big time. I was like, "Where's the beach?"
Yeah, where's the beach? Well, we are on the south shore of the lake.
Yeah, that's true. There is a beach here, slightly different from Pacific Ocean, but I mean, definitely culture, knowing how to orient yourself in a suburban environment from, going into LA was such a diverse, like there was equal parts, Asian, Black, Hispanic, white. It was so coming to Paris, it was like, oh wow, everybody is looks the same, and just didn't really see myself as different, but then started to feel different, as a little guy, I was 8 years old, right? So that was an interesting experience, just kind of that journey of going outside even though I was only 8, right? That was oh, there's friction here, and I don't know why. Looking back on that, understandable. So that was interesting as a young boy. But most recently, I think my transition from having a main typical 9-to-5 job, where I worked at the University of Toledo, was there for 5 years. Great experience, learned a ton, but just really felt the kind of pull towards owning my own business, and that's kind of where we find ourselves here today, right? So love podcasts and saw a potential opportunity to kind of create something as just producing podcasts for companies, as I felt like that's kind of a niche that is an emerging type of thing. I mean, a podcast has been around for a long time, but there's video producers, there's photographers, and I love doing that stuff, but I know that I'm not going to compete with those guys, because there's guys that are amazing filmmakers, like this guy, Keegan. I mean, he does great stuff. But I think where I just love this medium as a medium for conversation, as a long form medium for teasing out information that's relevant to culture, because just certain things, certain conclusions you can't adequately arrive at without that span of time. A lot of times you need time and a critical mass of narrative to substantiate the arrival at a certain conclusion. And I think long-form podcasting has revealed that truth, that sometimes you need a very drawn-out narrative to arrive at a certain kind of conclusion, and you can't say something without having a lot of evidence. And sometimes evidence isn't just facts, it's narrative. I think narrative evidence is something that we need to pay more attention to, because, I mean, it's so easy to mislead someone with, hey, here's a fact. Coming from, religious backgrounds, here's a Bible verse. See, what you did is wrong, or what I did is right. Or here's this thing, here's this thing, here's this research, it means you're wrong. Or here's this research, you're wrong. Whether it's religion, academia, industry research, whatever it is, most of the time when you really dig into things, you start to realize, well, you're both right. It's just different contexts, different scenarios. So I've, as a, millennial, whatever generation,
what generation are you? Really?
I don't know. Who cares? But I find, I know we've talked a lot about books, and I read books, But I wouldn't consider myself well-read like you. You're well-read. I am well-watched. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and that's where I find that I gain the most. I love reading, but it's like it takes more energy for me. I think it's higher resolution information in a book. Like you can get exactly what they're saying.
Okay.
But it's lower bandwidth.
Okay.
So when I watch a YouTube video or a podcast, it's high bandwidth, a little bit lower resolution in a way, because it's like it goes in like really fast. But like when I read something, it sticks usually. But watching YouTube video, it's a little bit, a little more passive. So, but that's my.
It's a great way to get information, though. I mean,
yeah,
many ways to learn.
Yeah, and it's like it emerged in my generation. It kind of came out in 2010, and it's kind of new, but not that new. So anyway, I think I went on a tangent there, but yeah,
no, not at all. The podcast thing is really a great way to get information out, and I've got several friends that have written books before.
Yeah,
and they've constantly on my case of when you got to write a book, and I don't have a book in me per se, but they've had plenty of experience between their first copy and what comes out. Are not the same.
Right.
Too many chefs in that cooking broth.
The editors and stuff like that.
Exactly, and so I think a podcast is a way to get out some really decent information,
right,
firsthand, so people can experience it. And I think many of us learn better in an auditory kind of way, hearing, as opposed to reading. And you're right. I love to read, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Sure.
About what are some important reads that you might have had. Any particular person or a couple people that might have been influential in your defining moments at all?
Several, but I think particularly in relation to getting into podcasting and video and stuff like that. There was this YouTuber named Casey Neistat, and he just kind of revealed video production as something that everybody could do, and he was just like this really cool dude that was like lived in New York, had this crazy story, like he like moved there with like no money, somehow like survived, worked in a artist studio, this guy named Tom Sachs, who's like a brilliant, amazing artist that really does a lot of like weird pieces. Like he made like a NASA launch station out of like plywood and PVC, but it looks super realistic. Like he's just a weirdo, and he was there like during 9/11, and he got like video, and then he started like making videos. He just started making videos with like a camcorder, and then like he started buying like point and shoot cameras and making films, and then eventually he made this like daily vlog, which was like kind of blew up, and it was just kind of like, it was kind of stupid. It was just like anybody that knows a daily vlog, so it's like they're kind of like really simple, but it kind of like teased out like, hey, I can probably make videos too. So I started getting into video production, and in that made, did some different projects for friends, and just kind of like enjoyed using the camera. And then like I started getting into like Joe Rogan podcasts. Like, oh, this is cool. Seeing like how this guy who's, like I never really liked Joe Rogan, but like the more I saw how he teased out information from a broad group of people, like a lot of different types of people, like, wow, like this is interesting. He's asking simple questions and coming to kind of profound conclusions. And, like, I guess in a lot of ways, like coming from a background that was very lots of different, like from like a Christian background, like growing up in church, like listening to like longer sermons, these types of things, kind of seeing some overlap there in the conversation and direction of the conversation, because the direction of the conversation is from like something that's kind of broad to something more specific, that resembles reality, that resembles truth. And I started to see a lot of overlaps in that, and like, wow, this is significant. This is a cool medium for conveying information. And so Joe Rogan was like my starting point for podcasts, and just started getting into people like Jordan Peterson, and from Jordan Peterson, like getting into folks that maybe you're more like, that you're into, like Carl Jung, like who's an older, like, he's like one of those.
Carl Jung doesn't have any podcasts.
He doesn't have any podcasts.
There's lots of people that.
He's one of those foundational like psychologists that has discovered many things about humanity and the mind.
Jordan Peterson talks quite a bit about Carl Jung.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love how you took a chance here. Is what you did. You nurtured an interest for a while. I mean, it took a while. This wasn't just one day you wake up and you say, hey, I'm going to start my own thing.
Correct.
But you nurtured an interest for a while, and it got deeper and deeper and deeper. And then you came to what I call a defining moment, where you decided to take a chance.
Yeah.
And to push off into unknown territory, per se, and see what happens. Now, I'm intrigued because a defining moment for me personally was connecting my defining moment with yours. And here we are sitting in this table here.
Because we were talking about making videos like
forever,
ago.
Forever for my little business. Per se. But when I retired from a previous career, I don't play golf, and so my wife said, "Well, you better go find something to do because you're not going to sit around the house."
And that's a good wife.
Yes, and so. I've always been intrigued by psychotherapy, psychiatric work, things like that. Went back to school at 60 years old, per se, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and got a degree in clinical mental health counseling, and then opened my own practice, private practice, which I'm still doing.
Yeah,
and so I've always been interested in pushing the envelope a little bit.
Sure.
And so my defining moment was a defining moment for me, was starting my own practice.
Cool.
And then connecting up with you a couple of years and just growing a friendship over the years, and then our interest.
Connecting through Code City.
Yes.
Nate. Shout out to Nate if you're watching. Nate Walk.
Yes. And some remarkable things happen right here in downtown Toledo. Lots of neat things got connected. And so I've been working on this podcast for a couple of years, knowing that this is really a great way to have decent conversation and to present some significant ideas out there. Not more than just opinions, but ideas that have meat on them. And so your interest and my interest have come together, and so now we've got this partnership that we've called Guy Shrink.
I like that differentiation between opinions and ideas that have meat on it. Talk more about that.
Well, I think ideas come from reflection, thinking, and reflection, and research from the standpoint of looking at contrasting ideas, whereas opinions are things I can just shoot from the hip kind of thing. And someone said, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but not your own facts. And so I think ideas can be based in facts with some evidence. And so thinking is a difficult prospect, critical thinking particularly. And so that's what I meant when I said facts or ideas and opinions. So cool. I would like to do here at Guy Shrink is talk about ideas.
Yeah, totally.
So, a defining moment, that taking a chance kind of thing.
Cool. I like how we have similar defining moments.
Yes.
Starting new things, going into quote unquote small business or entrepreneurship. It's kind of a debatable definition of entrepreneurship versus small business, but starting something new is like going into the unknown. I mean,
yeah, but yes, but the unknown is unknown for me. But there's been a lot of good stuff out there that if you did some research on, so to speak, and checked out like you did, and I've done, so you kind of get a feel for the field that you're going to go into, as opposed to just jumping off a cliff and hoping something will catch you.
Right. Yeah, I know when I first started this, which was a few months ago. I mean, I really started working on it in January of this year, the beginning of this year, and now it's almost October, right? It's September 21st today. So really started building it in January, little by little, and made the jump in April. And we started working together April, May, something like that. May, June or something. I don't remember. But I think that those first initial months were definitely scary. It's like, what's going to happen? What was it like for you?
Pushing back fear. Well, I had a lot of people that said, you're never going to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah. Same.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to do that. You need to do this.
Yeah.
And
all well-meaning, right?
Oh yeah. Like, these are all friends. Yes.
When I talked to my older brother about it, because like we share podcasts all the time, and a lot of like entrepreneurship podcasts, and like a lot of one of the rules is like, make sure you're making as much money on your business than what you're making at your thing, and I was not at that point when I quit, which was and I was like, I was consciously saying, this is a stupid idea, but I just got to do it. I literally, that was my thought process. Like, this is not the right thing to do, but this is what I have to do.
Well, if you don't, if you never try it out, you'll never know.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're going to do it. And you already know going in, because you've done enough research to know.
True.
You're not going to make $1 gazillion in the first 6 months.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So it's going to take probably a 3-year turnaround before it becomes really, really profitable.
Exactly.
And so that means there's hard work involved. And stick-to-itiveness, or whatever you want to call it. Right. So we've been talking about defining moments, and you talked about taking a chance, shifting careers. That's also what I've done. I'm sure many of our listeners are in that same situation, and our encouragement is do plenty of research, and take a step and try it out, and see what might happen. See what might happen. So one of the things I was kind of interested in, and we did talk a little bit about books and your podcasts. Is there any particular book or like that's been insightful for you that you might want to say, this really gave me a life change?
Probably a few. Let me think. I know you've read it. You tell me about so many good books. I want to hear your book first, because you got some good books.
Well, I got dozens. But it's not hoarding if it's books.
Oh, okay. So I heard this term the other day on that. So I love different languages because they can like encapsulate certain ideas very succinctly. So like in Japanese, there's a lot of great Japanese words that just like are amazing. One's called tsundoku. It's a person that buys books and just never reads them. Collects them. They literally have one word that encapsulates that experience. I was like, oh, that's me. I was talking to a guy over the weekend, and he mentioned that. I was like, oh, that's totally me.
Yeah, that's definitely me. I've never met a book I didn't like, kind of thing. What's Amazon going to have, or what's the local bookstore going to have that's on special? So my wife says, about every 3 days you get something, some book.
Oh, really?
In the mail. But there's a couple of books that come to my mind. That you asked that question.
Shoot.
And these are I've got several dozen, but these are 4 that in particular stand out for me. The first one is Scott Peck's book called The Road Less Traveled, which I read, I don't know, centuries ago, decades ago. A friend of mine gave it to me, and I read it in pretty much one sitting, and it was about the journey of nurturing your inner being, your psyche. Scott Peck was a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And talked about love and how important love is in one's formation of a person, one's soul formation. It was a beautiful book, and I would say that in my early 30s is when I read it. That was had a significant impact for me because it helped me think in terms of depth psychology, which certainly Carl Jung was all about probing the depths of one's being. That was one. Another book that I read 3 or 4 times was a book by a man named Ernest Kurtz, Kurtz, and it's called The Spirituality of Imperfection. Ernie Kurtz was a professor at the University of Michigan and taught, I believe, the history of ideas. It's a brilliant book, but it talks about the difference between religion and spirituality.
Interesting.
A little thumbnail thing. Religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, but spirituality is for people who've been there and don't want to go back.
Hey, that's a good definition.
Seems kind of trite, but it was a really fine piece. And
I like it.
The subtitle of that was The Spiritual Treasures of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Interesting.
And what comes out of the practice of, in this case, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it really is about character building. What happens when you attend to these kinds of things? You face what I think William James called Gerissenheit. I think that was the name, which is basically torn to pieces. I mean, your existential being you're just fraught with anxiety all the time.
Yeah,
that's a way of putting it.
No
and
fun.
And what happens when you begin embracing that and then working with it, and things like forgiveness and humility and being at home in the world become the natural products of attending to who you are. But it's about attending to your imperfections as opposed to striving for perfections. Brilliant book. And I read it several times, and every time I read it, I go, when did they put that in there?
Yeah,
so that was one. That's one. A third book that I read daily is Ryan Holiday's book called The Daily Stoic, where he has
Is it like a
reading a day, a reading a day,
interesting.
a little piece from a Stoic philosopher like Seneca or Marcus Aurelius
Cool.
or
I like those
Epictetus.
guys. I should check that book out.
Yes, it's a great book, and then Ryan's got a little commentary about it.
The Daily Stoic.
A Daily Stoic, and about Stoic philosophy, which is still a very usable way of being. That's what I like about Stoicism. It's opposed to doctrines and dogmas. It's about inviting people into a way of being, a way of life.
Interesting.
Which is a really important thing to think about.
Yeah.
So I read that. I really like that a lot. And then the fourth book that has had a big impact on me, I'm reaching over here for it, that I just came across it in a podcast, because I listen to podcasts every day when I'm working out at the gym. It's
nice.
As opposed to dumb music things. It's called 4,000 Weeks. Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman.
Seems like a lot of weeks.
Well, interesting, 4,000 weeks is pretty much a standard lifetime. If you live to be 80 years old, you get about 4,000 weeks.
Interesting.
And when my wife and I were talking, and she said, "Is that all?" Yeah, that's that's all, 4,000 weeks.
Wow.
And it's amazing that, well, listen, it wasn't just the 4th of July last week, a kind of thing, and time just marches on
no kidding.
very quickly. But in this book, he presents many good ideas, but he's got 5 questions that are worth thinking about in your time management skills.
Love
this
that.
is different than filling out your calendar or your planner or whatever.
Yeah.
And the first question that this just rocked my world here: where in your life or your work are you currently pursuing comfort when what's called for is a little discomfort?
Yeah.
And then he has a note here from James Hollis, who's a great Jungian therapist. And Hollis asks this question: does this choice I'm about to make diminish me or enlarge me? But thinking about that, and you and I were talking before we sat down here about, that's a kind of an everyday thing when we start thinking about it.
Yeah, in the micro and the macro.
Yeah. Is this the thing that I'm about to do diminish me or enlarge me? And again, this is about taking time to think. That's the difference between opinions and ideas.
Right.
Where you actually take some time. It's about slowing down the whole process.
Totally.
So we're constantly running. And if we could just slow down. So that's the first question that he asked. Oh my gosh, that really rocked me up.
Forcing you to put the things that you do into those columns.
Yes.
Define it.
Here was another question he came up with. Are you holding yourself or judging yourself by standards of productivity or performance that are impossible to meet?
Yeah, then you have to define it as well, right? What is possible for me?
Well, we were just talking before, and you talked about yesterday having this
Right.
little revelatory moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that about?
Yeah. Yesterday. So I was, obviously have lots of projects, lots of things to do, running the business, and I just realized and I was like, I worked a lot over the weekend, and I was like, I'm doing this, and editing all these things, and just realized that, I think I needed to take some time and process some of the things that I've been reading, things that I've been talking with friends about, things that I've been listening to, and quite honestly, also some dreams that I've had. And so I was working, editing, and I just felt like I needed to just stop and process. And I mean, now I'm not, I'm working for myself now, so technically I can do that. But, oftentimes we are our, worst and best taskmaster. You have a
little voice going on here.
Yeah.
Keep working.
Exactly. So, so I realized that, different spaces have different functions, right? So I have an office that is a function for work, right? I have my apartment, which is a lot of, where I cook, chill, and sleep, right? But usually if I want to, have some time to think, I'll go to a coffee shop. But also I find if I want to get my deepest thoughts and kind of hash those out, driving is great. I don't know what it is. It's you're kind of alone, but you're also moving, and there's just a really interesting dynamic. I haven't really taken a lot of time to define why it's so good, but it's really good for me. I do sometimes I write, sometimes I sing, and then I'll sometimes just turn. I feel like going right here, left, I'll go straight, and then you find places you never knew existed. So ended up in somewhere on the shore of Lake Erie in Oregon, Ohio. Beautiful little place. Never been there before in my life. I lived here in Toledo for a very long time, and happened upon a park or a field of sorts, and just I'm a nature guy. I like nature. I like foraging. I'm really into agriculture and plants and all types of stuff like that. Ever since I was a little kid, I loved hanging out in trees, finding, wild fruit trees, berry, all that stuff.
Yeah, you're a mushroom hunter.
Yeah,
too.
mushroom hunter.
Yes.
I literally have a separate Instagram account just for the mushrooms and plants that I find. So, Forage Toledo, check it out. Anyways, so I'm really into that stuff, and I find there's a lot of interesting analogies to life and spirituality in those simple little, layers of life, right? So, I think that was kind of it's not that I look for meaning in flowers, but it's the flowers are there and they're kind of like a backdrop or an accompaniment to give me a space to have a certain posture to tease out these different feelings or ideas or stage in life that I'm in. So just starting the business, taking it to another level, collaborating with different people, potentially doing some traveling, these different pathways. Sometimes, too many ideas, if you haven't sorted them, can just become overwhelming.
Yes.
Yes, and
indeed.
so I decided it was time to take a day, and to me, my relationship with God through Jesus is a huge part of my life. And there was in the beginning of my life, I was very outspoken about that, but I just started to kind of I need to take some time, figure things out for myself. So I don't really talk about that outwardly too much. Like I don't post a lot about it on social media. You know, I'm not like the guy that posts Bible verses and you know, all that type of stuff very often. But I'm starting to do that more as I become more comfortable with how that orients into like modern culture and kind of like my identity and stuff like that. So yeah, I took some, and I like photography, so I took some pictures of the pretty flowers because I love flowers, and flowers. Like I think part of my post yesterday was because different flowers come up as the seasons change, right? And we're going into fall. There's a lot of aster flowers, which are some of my favorites, and they're just kind of small, kind of a humble flower, and they come out. There's a lot of different ones, different colors, and they're kind of cool. So it just was, I didn't come to any conclusions, on that trip, but I did feel like that was the work I needed to do in that time, and woke up this morning ready to take on the beginning of this next season as fall comes upon us, and as I, continue to live and build this company, make more podcasts, work with cool guys like you, Bill, and Keegan, and just try to contribute to the narrative of our America.
Yeah.
In the small way that I can.
Yes. Jordan, I really like that piece you just said about I didn't need to have a conclusion to this. I didn't need to have something all settled out or whatever, which is one of the questions that 4,000 Weeks asks. That was one of the other questions that he came up with about asking yourself, how would you spend your day differently if you didn't care so much about seeing your actions reach a fruition? That is, I'm going to take the day off, and at the end of the day, I'm going to settle X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You didn't have that as an agenda. You just went out there because you knew deep down inside, you knew you needed to step back, take a breather, and you didn't have any you didn't have any idea that you had to get something done by the end of the trip.
And like to add to that, I would have liked to have come to like a conclusion, but I realized that I didn't, and certain things you just can't force. So I said, okay, well, today's not the day, because I think, most people want to come to a conclusion, but that I think is a dangerous desire.
Yes,
because if you want to come to a conclusion and you come to the wrong conclusion,
that's
dangerous.
A forced conclusion isn't good.
Yeah.
Again, that speaks to that previous conversation you and I had about just conflict in general. Is it conflict resolution or is it conflict management? Do I need to have everything resolved, or do I need to see this as a process that needs to be managed? And if I can be okay with not everything I do is going to have a, so to speak, wrapped up, tied up in a bow conclusion, I'm a lot freer to explore options and other ways of thinking as opposed to forcing something to happen.
Yeah.
That's another piece that came out of that book. I love it, the fact that you just were able to just say, and you said to yourself, I need to go for a drive, whatever, and the flowers just ushered you into another mind space, which is an important thing for us to do.
Yeah, and I was thinking actually about your initial comment that started this conversation about something about like masculinity, right? And I was thinking, like, this is not a American masculine thing to enjoy, but I just stinking love them. Like, they're beautiful, they smell good, they look cool. What's not to like, right? But flowers are, flowers do have feminine qualities, and maybe I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think that's a layer that is not entirely like it wasn't always like that. You know what I mean? It's like these different symbols, I think when we appreciate them, bring out a part of a person.
Yes, I believe that's true.
I think everybody likes flowers.
Yes,
everybody.
Yes.
But it's like some people are, I'm not, okay, cool flower,
Yes.
But like if we, start to talk about our appreciation of things, a part of us comes out, and potentially even grows. And maybe that's a part of us that needs to grow.
I absolutely agree with that. I think we're driven in a direction of man versus nature, and man must conquer nature.
Right.
But it's not nice to get Mother Nature mad. It's not a good thing.
Mother
to get
Nature has
mad.
flowers, but Mother Nature has poisonous mushrooms that 1 gram will kill you. And bears and all kinds of stuff.
So one of the things we're advocating here in this little conversation is take a day off and just go and do nothing. Like you did.
Yeah.
Just drive and see what happens, and walk out in some flowers or some woods, and realize there's more to life than just you. So
100%.
Yeah,
I want to hit that book question that you said, because I do have a few.
Yeah.
Sorry for the abrupt right turn here.
No. That's how you drive. I've been behind you before, so I know what that's
true,
like.
Man. I'm like a race car driver. My mom hates driving with me because she's like, Jordan! She's like hanging on to the right thing. I'm like, I think I get it from my dad, but it happens. So there was this book by a guy named Donald Miller. It's called Blue Like Jazz. Familiar with it?
Yes.
I read that when, I was probably like 19 or something like that. And it was really cool to me because it was, it was kind of like this guy's life story in a nutshell of his kind of roller coaster ride of his Christian walk and how he was. There's a few points I remember. Like he lived in a house with a few guys, and they were like really zealous, and they were like, we're gonna do this, and then like they were really, and then they kind of like, moved away, got married, this type of thing, and they were like trying to keep in touch, and they just kind of like, the decrescendo of their anthem. Just kind of, and they're like, why does that happen? Well, that's just kind of life. It wasn't like, oh, we were terrible, and we're like, it's just like, life comes in cycles.
Yes.
And like he there's this one moment where he's kind of at a low, and he's describing his Bible on the floor, like that was covered in like laundry, as like a neglected puppy dog looking at him, like that he hadn't fed in a month. Like, and he's just like, what am I doing? Like, why have I like. And it wasn't like, oh, I repent, I'm a sinner. It was like, man, I'm just like a lame-o, just like not like a superlative in any direction. Just like, man, I just got bored and uninspired, and how can I be re-inspired? And like, then he like volunteered at a camp, and it was just like this very like not bipolar way of looking at things. I think a lot of times in Christianity, or perhaps even any religion, because I've been chatting with my friend Ziad, who's Muslim, and I'm just finding so many similarities in our experience, but that's another topic. But like that narrative really was like, it's not a 1 or a 0. There's this spectrum of experience that is nuanced, and it's not about achieving holiness, but it's about living a life that's beautiful and trying to like approach that beauty. And that's like, and like, because in a lot of ways, like, if we're going to talk about Christianity, like Jesus was not a rule follower. He just was not a rule follower, right? He did things that were outside of culture, outside of the idea of anybody in his time. And so that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around and orient yourself towards, because it's like, we don't want to be revolutionaries a lot of the times, like maybe in certain moments, but like, I just want to, in a lot of ways, I want to just do what I'm supposed to do. But I think it's like, it kind of like showed a narrative of life can be more than what you think it is. So that was one, Blue Like Jazz. And like the name of that book is just so cool, right? Blue
Like
Jazz.
It is.
And who doesn't like jazz, right? If you don't like jazz, get out of here.
There's lots of improvisations with jazz. That's the brilliancy of jazz, and related, of course, to the African American experience of the blues and the spirituals. That life is about improvisations.
Yeah.
And that you take a theme and you go with it until it stops, and you don't force it. You move on to another.
You let it lead you.
You let it go. That's exactly right.
I'll never forget, because I grew up playing rock and roll, and I love rock and roll music. It's fun. It's straightforward. It's American. You know where it's going. You know where it's going to end, and it's like it's a rush, right? But it's not jazz.
No.
And when I started playing jazz, because I'm a drummer, and I started playing jazz when I started going to college at Owens Community College, and I joined like the jazz group. It was basically like if you could play, you're in. You know, like everybody got to play. Right?
Okay.
It's a community college.
Okay.
You know, not a high bar. So, but I started to realize this is a different language that I don't know how to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And it was tough, but because you listen to jazz, like, oh man, they're just like so easy. But like, can I do that with my hand? Like, what are they doing? Because like, it's just a different language. So it's cool. It's, I don't know, it's something interesting. So another book, this one is also a Christian related book. It's called The Breaking of the Outer Man and the Release of the Spirit by this guy named Watchman Nee, who's this Chinese guy from like the 1930s, 40s.
Yeah, I think you're
right. That one really impacted me because it differentiated like an inner life and an outer life, and like realizing like there's this like tension between there's an outward thing and something deeper, which is kind of like what my experience that I talked about yesterday with the flowers. It's like there's an outward world, or there's an outward person, or there's a layer of Jordan that's like, gotta do work, gotta do the things, you know, gotta pay the bills, blah blah. But there's a inner Jordan or inner man that kind of is a more essential connection to life, to the spirit, to the spiritual nature of life. And it's like, I think one of the themes is like the things we go through in life put cracks in our outer man so that the inner man can kind of like come out. Because if if we're so put together on the outside, you know, it's a lot of work keeping that up, and a lot of times that work to keep up our outer stuff is what's really sinful, or what's really like missing the mark. You know, if we try so hard,
good way of putting it.
Yeah, we try so hard to keep this outward thing intact.
Right.
We're missing a lot, but
lots of compromises to keep that outward. The outward guy working,
right?
I mean, lots of ass kissing, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, totally.
You know, being willing to compromise some principles or whatever in that inner person, which you can't get in touch with in 15 minutes, by the way.
Yeah.
This is some depth stuff.
Right.
But most all of us are willing to bargain what's called our essential selves to get either some immediate satisfaction or something else down the road.
Yeah.
And you're saying a walk in the flowers helps you get back in touch with
sometimes,
you know, a piece of probably who you really are.
Yeah.
I think it was C.S. Lewis who said something about we're spiritual beings having a physical experience.
Yeah, I like that.
The idea is that the spiritual, not necessarily religious, but psyche, the inner person who we are, psyche, the Greek word for soul.
Yeah.
That there's a depth to us that's worth plummeting, that's worth going into.
Totally.
But you don't do that in 15 minutes. Oh, I got 10 minutes. I think I'll. No.
I mean, like, you know, like if you can get 10 minutes to go into that, I mean, for sure. But like, you definitely need more time than that to touch that. And I think like, that's definitely. I mean, there's so much behind that, and that book has so much depth. But in the like, you know, short time I have to describe that.
It obviously made a difference in who you are.
Yeah.
And so that's what I call these revelatory moments, these voices from outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
They give us something that we aren't able to think up on ourselves or muster up on ourselves, and we need another voice. That doesn't mean I'm hearing voices, but we need something else to help us.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts here that we want to have on our first episode here?
Man, so much there. I'm so glad I get to do this with you. It's going to be so fun just listening to the different conversations you're going to have, because I know that you have, a lot of different people that you're connected with that you'll be talking to about a wide array of topics, and I'm looking forward to seeing the impact of this on our region. To be honest,
I'm so happy that we're doing this together. Thoughtful ideas. In the sea of crazy opinions. So, well, Jordan Valdiviez, my good friend, compatriot, partner in crime, my producer, along with Keegan Berner over here, who's our other co-producer. So thanks for our first episode of Guy Shrink, and stay tuned, and let's keep moving forward.
Let's do it.